Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the AI Interconnect podcast. I'm your host, Lauron. This show is where we explore how founders and operators are actually building, scaling, and navigating complex systems across industries and ecosystem. But today's episode is slightly different. We are not just talking about AI, we are talking about how ecosystems are built and how funders can plug into them across Europe. And today we are joined by Fabrizio Cardinali, founders and CEO of No Hedge, entrepreneur, startup investor, and long-time innovation advisor to leading European institutions and global companies across industry, sectors, and technology, mainly early stage, exponential, and disruptive technologies such as AI, where Fabrizio's had played early days since the 80s before the hypes arrive. And Fabrizio, great to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Lauren. Great to be here. And unfortunately, saying that you are an 80s player in AI means that you're not that young any longer. So that's the only negative part in these days. But that said, yes, you are correct. I mean, I started my career as an electronic engineer, degreed in the University of Genoa, North West Italy, and doing one of I would say, Europe's first thesis using AI for expert systems in medicine. And those were wonderful days, without the hype today. It was a different kind of AI. It's what the world recognizes as the second wave, because the first wave, which is the neural networks, one happened in the 70s, 80s, early, and then kicked in this logic AI, where the idea was to actually model the world with objects and object-oriented programming. Wonderful things like list machines, prologue machines, Smalltalk, which was done by Xerox PARC, by Alan Kay, one of the inventors of computer and desktop computing, and everything then flowed from Apple to the iPhone and so on. So it was very early days. It actually didn't work because it wasn't the computational power that you need today and that we do have today. And AGI was and still is a very, very broad topic. So it was very difficult to model everything out there just for the sake of putting it into computers. So then gave up. I mean, let's say using humans to teach machines, and I reverted to the other side. So I pivoted into e-learning and knowledge management, actually using machines, even dummy machines like computers, to actually train the people in using e-learning and knowledge management. And that's where I actually started my entrepreneurial career, because I founded companies like Junti Labs, Learn Exact, Interactive Labs, which actually grew to hundreds of people, and I did some good exits. And that's where I actually landed in 2017 after some exits to found a consultancy firm, which is No Hedge. So No Hedge, it's a word game between knowledge and edge computing, getting an edge to competition, and even hedge like funding, but essentially also like the trees that you put around yourself to actually protect yourself. And then you're looking into the future beyond the hedge, which was the main reason why we gave it this name. Also, actually, because we were a little bit frustrated, because if you Google anything which has to do with knowledge, even though it's the most known technology, feature of humankind since Socrates valorized it, it's incredibly patented. So you can't use knowledge in any declination. So we put an H there, and that's how we solved it.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, I mean, of course. So Fabrizio, you have been working across startup, corporates, and institution. Before we dive into the Vittoria insurance use case and talk more of its 7 insurtech open call, let's zoom out at 5,000 meters above the current state of the world of AI. How do you think Europe should tackle the AI race, riding the right form of innovation? Or if I may, in your public keynotes, you have talked about an innovation clock and 7 minutes to midnight and the coming big reset or the big crude change driven by AI. How can open innovation and early phase investment help Europe stay competitive in the AI race before it's too late?
Yeah, that was when we started, marketing this new consulting boutique, a network of experts about the topics of AI, IoT, blockchain, that in 2017 was just re-emerging. I mean, I had to prepare my marketing suitcase. So I go out and do speeches to the executives of big companies and to the executives of startups. And I'm a true believer of what, Winston Churchill once said, that the further backward you can look, the more likely you are going to see into the future. And, that also relates to the Vico history returns and things happening with upwards and downwards. But the main thing is to look at the big picture, as you were saying, 5,000 meters on the above Earth, and look down and see what's happening. So to do that, I used a paradigm which has been made famous by Carl Sagan, which you might know. It's more famous in the US. It's the most seen scientific TV show in the world. What he actually did, the cosmic calendar, he actually made the more than 13 billion years history of mankind and the universe into a yearly calendar. So 1st of January being the Big Bang, and the 31st of December is our contemporary society. And, it was incredibly successful. He turned on every day, presenting what happened that day. And obviously, there was a lot of talking about Cosmo. That's why cosmic calendar. But, the real discovery was that when it comes to Homo sapiens and the human beings, the knowledge and the intelligence that of which we are much talking today, actually happens more or less at 7 minutes to the midnight clock of the 31st of December. Everything just rushes. And, these revolutions are, you understand them much more once they are past. I mean, if you're living there, it's quite, it seems a long time, and you literally don't have time to focus down. So what I did, I borrowed that idea, and I mapped the history of innovation on 24-hour clock. So I, reduced the time, and I actually focused only on innovation, putting Anno Domini zero. So when, at least in Western countries, we had Anno Domini zero of the calendar at the starting of the day. And the 24th hours was at the moment that Kurzweil set for the singularity to happen. Kurzweil is a genius guy. He's a entrepreneurial startupper. He was invited at the 60s to be the head of AI in Google. After that, in his lifetime, he invented a lot of stuff like the Kurzweil synthesizers that Stevie Wonder made famous, or the Braille machine for blind people with Xerox and others. So he's an inventor, a technical savvy guy, but also a very, very well-known futurist writer. And in 2005, he actually predicted that by 2029, AGI, what he called singularity, would have happened, with machines overpassing human knowledge. So if you actually map zero at midnight and the 24-hour at the 2029, it happens that when we did No Hedge, we were 7 minutes to midnight again. And 7 minutes to midnight is not just a recurring timing. You used to find it in rock. I think it's a Van Halen famous tune. It's also used by the scientists, atomic scientists in the world, which said how close we are to the global holocaust of, the Third World War. And every year they convene, and it never get that close to 7 minutes to midnight. It actually happened during the Cold War. And I fear that this year, I don't know when they will convene. They might even go beyond the 7 minutes to midnight. So off I went. I invented this innovation clock, and I phrased my speaks saying, that my keynote saying 7 minutes to midnight, how can Europe recover and compete in the advent of the third AI wave? Because it was clear in 2017 that things were rapidly moving. You had old people from AI, as old like me, like LeCun, Banjo, Hinton. They would just, disappeared for, let's say, the 90s and the first part of the 2000s. And then they were all recalled. I mean, Jean LeCun to lead Meta AI, Hinton to lead, to open the Vector Institute in Toronto, and others, and actually Kurzweil to lead AI advancements. and something was happening. You also had young people like Goodfellow inventing de facto generative AI and being hired by the just constituted OpenAI, moving again teams to Google Research and then Google Brain and then Google DeepMind. A lot of things were happening. And suddenly in 2016, just a couple of months before we opened No Hedge, here comes AlphaGo, which informs the world on Nature, actually, that they won against an algo, AI algo, won against the major player of Go, which is a Chinese game that Western societies know far less, but it's things of times more difficult than chess. And it's got visuals and, the insights. So you actually look at these playboard, and you have to have a visual understanding of where to position the next token, and the computer won. So for me, that was a setting point. So in this clock, this happens again 7 minutes to midnight. But the other crucial thing is that if you look at the clock, again, nothing happens seriously in innovation up to more or less 5:36 p.m. in the afternoon. So we have more than 18 hours out of 24 where nothing happens. And then suddenly you have maybe the last time that Europe was really leading the world of innovation, science, medicine, art, which was a renaissance. I mean, we never went back to renaissance. And, strangely enough, Americans, Japanese, and even other Eastern societies, they valorize renaissance much more than Europeans do. And, there are consultants in open innovation and change management like Michael Gelb or Franz Johansson out of I think he's out of one of the big American Harvard, I think. And what they teach is, how to think like Leonardo. This is Michael Gelb. The Medici Effect by Franz Johansson. So the Medici Effect is actually an ecosystem in Florence which, just boosted with what he called intersectional creativity and innovation. So not just innovation, but people working together into labs with different cultures and backgrounds, scientific, but mostly humanistic, because there was no dogmatic silos between these sciences in that time. And huge things were invented, from the of Raffaello, Leonardo, Michelangelo, and the likes, but a lot of medical and, the Leonardo machines are just a huge bump forwards in engineering. And a lot recognized that the first, second, third, and final fourth industrial revolution actually has got roots in that moment. But what happened from 0 to 6 p.m. to make this happen? That's quite important. I mean, there's a British economist, which actually said that, the nature resets itself. So when things go worse and worse, and he was actually referring to the demographic growth and to the difficulty of harvesting new crops and feeding the world, the nature just does something to reset and restart. And that what happened in those days, which are literally about, I think it's let's say around this 4 o'clock in the afternoon in 14th century, where what happens is that sailors from Genoa, the city nearby where we live, here in the offices we are today, they were coming back, one of the toughest sea republics from Crimea and Kaffa, where they had their installments. And they were attached by Mamelukes, and they were, throwing contaminated people over the walls over there. And they were it was one of the biggest pestilence in those days, because it was actually driven by, it wasn't viral, it was from bacterial reasons. But anyhow, they came back, they landed first in Sicily and then in Genoa. And that's where Europe got contaminated. And this brought to more or less 80% zerifying of the population. And it took a couple of, let's say, minutes or a quarter of an hours in the 24-hour clock. And, the world had to restart. And it restarted in the best way. I mean, it actually had much fewer people, much more possibility to expand. New startups, let's call them like that, just got, a new world to discover, like Christopher Columbus. I mean, he actually faked it till they made it, because he actually, asked his brother, which was a cartographer in the Portuguese court, to make a fake of the African length, because they already knew that with Vasco da Gama and others that Africa wasn't that depth in in latitude, but he actually added a couple of latitudes so that he could go to Isabel in Spain and get funded. He more or less got K of today, so the typical friends and family investors of a startup, and presumably it was the biggest bet ever in venture capital. So that's what's happening today. The real pestilence, or let's say it's pandemics with COVID, and surely that has zerified a lot of the aspects that we are living. I don't think we realize how much that has changed the world we're working in. And obviously a lot of cons, but a lot of pros also, like teleworking. Europe can literally become, a Wi-Fi region where students go and proliferate on our wonderful bays here in Italy or in Spain. And why not? I mean, why should we just, get wiped out by American AI or China AI, which in these moments are ruling the world because, they literally are faster in this moment. So we need to reset, and a Renaissance 2.0 might be the only way of doing it. So maybe, let's say that the pestilence has gone. So luckily, let's embody it into COVID. But, even the war today is presumably another step of that zerification. But now we need to rebuild. We need to rebuild in businesses, in regulations, in regulated markets like insurance, because, it really needs to have a jump forward, not to be invaded literally by third-party economies and social areas which are faster than Europe in this moment.
I love it. This is great. Okay, a beautiful, beautiful journey into um, the Italian Renaissance. Okay, then let's move on and tell us more about the insurance market, which is a typical case of regulated market. How can new rules, regulation from EU or abroad, change the status quo, and how can Europe and companies like Vittoria Insurance position at best and then move forward?
Yeah, Vittoria Insurance is a typology of the customers that would have approached No Hedge in the early days. It actually happened around 2018, and we actually did the plans for opening the insurtech hub in 2019. We had a manager there, Gianfranco Baldinotti, which had the idea originally. He unfortunately left us a couple of years ago while riding with Harley Davidson, the Italian coastlines, but he seeded the right idea. He was also from Florentine origins, besides the other ones he had. So the first thing he said, whatever happens, our new hub will have the rooms titled on Michelangelo, Raffaello, or Leonardo, just to put that air, breathing the air that you could breathe in Florence in those days. We had the Medici because obviously Medici-like investors, because we had the insurance group behind, which happens to be one of the largest groups in Italy. We're talking of more than 500 direct agencies, 1,000 indirect agencies, more than 2 million clients, and also ties with international groups like Mafre. They're in Barcelona, well known. I think they have something in common with Modi, MAWDY, which is the service company, assistance company of Mafre, which has got activities in 23 countries in the world. So let's say Vittoria is mostly Italian focused, but if something happens here, which is one of Europe's biggest insurance market, you can literally export it quite easily. So we started looking into this. We funded Vittoria Hub in 2019, and then COVID came out, and we literally did 3 or 4 calls with teleworking and teleremote, changing completely the way you do selection of startups and so on. And today, at the 7th call, we have screened more than 500 startups. We have multiplied more than 10 times the value of the ones that have, let's say, either been incubated or accelerated, or even just got in contact with the selection process. So it is a place to be if you want to be alphabetized about insurtech, because what normally happens is that the startups which contact us, they don't know they have got a huge insurance potential because, they're doing other things like, home, domotics, enterprise software, mobility software, people software. But if you look at it, anything which can be tagged as recognized. And, in the early days, it was just the house and the car because you have a registry actually can be insured, like, a nice painting or a bicycle or other stuff that usually you couldn't insure. It's actually insurable. And it's also a market which dramatically needs innovation and open innovation coming from startups because regulation is going to change dramatically in the next future. We are in the No Hedge consultants of the European Commission. We also review regularly all the big R&D frameworks. After COVID or during COVID, the European Commission decided that after that social data has been lost against the Americans because literally they just took all the data of people and then out came the GDPR with some delay. They decided to anticipate monitoring and tracking of machinery data and AI. So they started to regulate a framework of regulations. The most famous ones is the EU AI Act, which is now out officially and will need to be adopted in the following months and years in Europe by all nations. But also other things like the new machinery regulations, both in industry and medical. So you actually need to have 10 years of records of how you're using wearables in medicine, for example, or how you're going to use machines in industry. And all those data will need to be audited against cybersecurity. You'll need to record who does AI with which data sets and with which knowledge. Okay, we've been consulting these activities, and so we knew them arriving, but we also knew that new business opportunities were arriving because besides these regulations, there are new regulations like the Digital Service Act or the Data Act, where the Commission says that you will be able to broker data into data spaces. So not only you will be producing data, for example, from a medical wearable device, but those who will consume those data could be a different actor. And you need to give those data. So you can't just say, no, it's proprietary, it's my stuff. The regulation, the new EU Data Act says that you must give the data to governments for free, and you must give the data to competitors, obviously on a monetization model, a little bit like banks today have to give your credit information to other banks because they can offer you something better. So GDPR still rules. If Lauron or Fabrizio don't want to benefit of that, they can opt out. But when you sign those 50-page contracts, you don't know what you're signing. So when you will be buying a car in the future, your guiding style, your driving style, your usage of that car will be sellable to another brand, which will then be offering other solutions for your mobility and so on. Now, if you see all this in context in a 5-year roadmap, this will be a much, much, much more insurable market. So insurance will be embedded into cars, into houses. You're out of your house, then you might have, just 3 or 4 hours insurance. Why should you pay insurance 24/7 if you spend 90% of your time in your office or in your house with something like Alexa or Google Home there? It's able to understand if I'm in home or not. And so adding insurance there or adding it into a drive of a car or adding it on a person or a business is going to change dramatically. And with the age of agentic AI, which is just happening while we'll talk, that will be embedded into your WhatsApp chats, into your Facebook interactions. So they will start understanding the person behind you and all your continuum of insurance needs. Bearing in mind that insurance are completely on your side because they do put the man and the client at the center, a little bit like the Vitruvian Leonardo man. You have a lot of technologies, but the core is the human being and the client. And so if you can follow that client across all these aspects of life being and of living and give him tailored, personalized insurance on demand when it needs it, that's going to be a Copernican revolution. So that's going to happen. And if the big, 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 insurance companies in Italy, Spain, Germany, UK just sit on fences thinking that the close regulation of today will preserve their leadership, they are on the road to become another black blockbuster, BlackBerry or Agfa in the revolution yet to come. So that's why innovation is key. Open innovation is even more important because you can't do it alone. You need startups. Exponential innovation, meaning, IoT, AI, blockchain together. And finally, early stage, because these things are happening as all the revolutions while we are talking. That's how we actually forged the Vittoria Hub. Today, we are a very good established group of professionals. We help these startuppers, and maybe we can talk a little bit about the call if that is in the focus.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is absolutely mind blowing. I love this discussion. So interesting. And tell us more about, yeah, the core, how it is structured, what it targets, and what it gives to international startups, also from Spain, where we are talking about today.
Yeah. First of all, the call is open internationally. So if you are in Spain, to the ties that we have there, but also around Europe, you're welcome to join. The site is www.vittoriahub, VITTORIA hub, HUB.com. You'll find it there. You can even Google me or and find me on LinkedIn and send me or you, Lauren, any request, and we will give additional information. Again, we have 4 pillars to the call. So the home, enterprise, person, and mobility. It's the macro focus, but even unsolicited proposals, also addressing the inbound processes of the insurance as well are welcome, even if the main focus is the service, the assistance. Because for us, ecosystem and insurance is an ecosystem. First of all, we want to prevent the problem. So we want to take care of your health and your car before you actually crash it or you have other problems. So, prevention, anything which deals with preventions of risks, especially today with satellites, you can prevent a lot of floods, issues with a house and so on. So prevention is the first thing. Then when it happens, you need to actually monitor, the state of what is the problem that you have, assist you continuously to, if you get blocked on the highway, sending a lorry to pick you up and take you off, all those sort of services. And then remediation, once you have a problem, how do you remediate afterwards? So that's an ecosystem. It's actually a matrix which follows you in different aspects from, house, work, leisure, mobility into the aspects of the prevention and assistance that I was talking about. So whoever proposes something in that scope, either inbound for the processes of underwriting policies, for example, and services to the end user from the insurance perspective, or outbound to the B2B to C market for the global practice, that would be interesting. We give services and cash around this 100K for the selected startups. They are mixed up on a first phase where we do this alphabetization 3 months course where we learn you to talk insurance. Even if you are a scale up or you are well established, you might not know nothing how to do policies, how to embed policies, how to sell insurance policies via your business. So that's where we give you an alphabetization and also an interaction with the experts from the mother company insurance group. Then we have an MVP or proof of concept with the company itself. We are not exclusive. So even if you work with other insurance or you want to work with other insurance, it's more than open because we don't want to, we want to evangelize about the crucial point we're in, where if we don't innovate in Europe and in regulated markets like insurance, we are out. So even if you already work with others or you want to work with others, you want to work with others, that's not a big issue. And finally, there's a final stage where we give, go to market. So agents, the agents of Vittoria, the clients get exposed to your services, and the snowball effects just starts. And maybe you start also thinking of going to Spain to internationalize and so on. And those are the 3 phases. And so these 100K are split in these 3K phases. We also give services in the 100K, which are, even spaces in Milan, in this wonderful hub that we used to have near Vittoria. Now it's near the Bosch Innovation Center in Milan, where as I told you, the rooms speak a Renaissance feeling of the bottegas, which is where, Leonardo did both science and medicine and art and everything together. And that's how we like to to people imagine how landing in Milan in Vittoria would look like.
I love it. Perfect, Fabrizio. And for funders listening, especially outside Italy, if you want help positioning your company before entering a program like Victoria Hub, you can also reach through AI Interconnect. We help refine your positioning and connect you to the right ecosystem. Fabrizio, thanks for sharing your vision, perfect path, the practical path to move forward, We truly must look back, as you say. And this was a great example of how innovation actually happen when ecosystem connect. And for everyone listening, if you value or got value from this, share it with one founder who should hear it. Fabrizio, thank you so much. Anything you want to add to this conversation?
No, I'm just looking forward to, other talks that, we are planning, even with some of the startups like which is investing in, especially for machinery and AI. With My Way, we have a plan there, and I will be eager to get back online and do a talk.
Definitely. We will keep the conversation going. We have many other episodes together. And that's it for today's episode of AI Interconnect. And if you enjoy it, share it with someone who's building the future, or better yet, someone who should be. And until next time, stay curious, stay creative, and keep building. So, see you to the next episode, Fabrizio and everyone.
Ciao,
Thank you.
Loren. Ciao, everybody.